Hello and welcome back to the channel. I've been fortunate enough to have some pretty cool days at work. I've seen concerts, I've had V8 supercars drive around my office, seen AFL, cricket, even had the chance to slide sideways around the main arena during the nighttime entertainment at the Sydney Royal Easter Show. And more recently I've had a chance to check out a Qantas Airbus A380 up close and personal. However, today I think will trump all of those, because I had the chance to get on a flight from Sydney up to Hamilton Island, which sounds pretty good in and of itself, but this time, rather than boarding the aircraft and turning right like you normally would, I got the chance to turn left and spend the day on the flight deck with the crew operating the flight up to Hamilton Island and back to Sydney. Now, being a self-confessed av-geek and flight sim nerd, having spent upwards of 400 hours in a virtual 737-800, to be given the chance to actually sit on the flight deck of a real life 737 was true pinch myself type stuff. Sitting down and seeing the switches and the panels laid out exactly how they are in sim was really special. Then getting a chance to watch the captain and first officer go through all their workflows, all their procedures, seeing how it's actually done in real life. Now, one of the things that was really awesome to witness was just the briefings. So I know this may sound a little bit common sense that the pilot and the first officer, or the captain and first officer, would brief each other on what's going on. It's the minute details they go to. So as example, before we push back from the gate, they discussed exactly the way they were going to taxi to the designated runway. Then they talked about how they were going to do the takeoff. If something was to go wrong on the low speed side, something was to go wrong on the high speed side, and then what they would do after the V1 call out. Making sure that everyone knew exactly what their part was to play and what procedure they would follow and where they would go. That sounds, again, all sort of common sense, but when you hear it all laid out, it just means that there's no ambiguity. Everyone knows exactly the role that they're going to play. Doesn't matter what happens. If everything goes smoothly, if everything goes pear-shaped, there's no questions of, oh, are you going to do this or are you going to do this? Everyone knows what they need to do. So then it was time to taxi on down to runway 34 right here in Sydney. And then once the traffic vacated the runway, it was our turn to push the throttles forward and take off towards Hamilton Island.
Cross it.
V1.
Rotate. Aussie right.
Now, one of the big differences between real life and flight sim is, in flight sim, you can set a flight up and then go off and do whatever you're going to do. If you go down to the shops, you go watch TV, whatever you're going to do. But obviously you don't have that luxury in the real world. And seeing how often both pilots would calculate weather, calculate fuel burn, making sure that the fuel they've burnt matches what they'd expect, discussing what they would do if those numbers didn't match up, whether the weather had changed, all that sort of stuff, just constantly making sure that they are aware of what's going on at all times. Now, again, this seems kind of common sense, but think about it if, for example, you went down to the shops and then you're about to drive home, discussing every last element of your drive home. So knowing exactly how much weight your groceries had, how much weight you had in fuel, your car, your passengers, knowing exactly the route you're going to take, how much power is needed to do that. Again, thinking about, okay, this street's closed, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. It's mental overload, the amount of things that they need to consider, the amount of factors they need to consider. Again, making sure that it doesn't matter what happens during that flight, the pilots are prepared to be able to tackle it. And coming into land at Hamilton Island was pretty special. Now, because I knew that I was going to be doing this flight, about a week ago, I actually did the exact same flight in flight sim. And by pure luck, the weather when I did it in sim matched what it was like in the real world. So being able to watch us do our approach was the exact same in sim as it was in the real world, being able to identify all the little islands, and then of course swooping around for our approach onto runway 14. And then after landing in Hamilton Island, it was a quick turnaround, only some 35 odd minutes before we were already on our way back to Sydney. So it was amazing just how quickly that we got in, turned around, got back out. And it was just because there were so many people on the ground orchestrating everything, whether it was getting the bags off the plane, bags on the plane, getting the fuel on board. Pretty much as soon as we pulled up at the gate, first officer was already planning the flight home. I mean, it's amazing to watch all these moving pieces around you and how they all add up to such a seamless service, especially when my experience of being on a plane has always just been the one as a passenger. So all you have to worry about is getting on board, getting your seat, inevitably finding out that someone's sitting in the wrong seat. And then of course there's always that person that jumps up the second the wheels touch the tarmac. And then coming in on our approach to Sydney was really, really special. I've flown home however many times and it's always just kind of been the same sort of view. But seeing it from the flight deck was unreal. Seeing the Sydney CBD, then also when we swung around facing runway 34 right, having a look at Sydney off in the distance, the runway directly in front of you, it was a really special moment. So being able to experience that again, as I've mentioned a few times, was just a real pinch myself type of moment. And a massive thank you to Captain Chris and First Officer Andrew for having me along in your office for the day. Thank you both so much for your hospitality, for answering all my stupid questions, and just putting up with me having a camera, taking photos all around the place. And a big thank you to Cara, who was the one that made all of this possible. So thank you so much for making it happen. If you guys have enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a big thumbs up. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.